Hello and welcome to the monthly sometime Wednesdays serial. I'm Matt. I'm going to talk some comics that I got this month, and I had a different kind of thought when I was going through this month because my comics amount has ballooned in the last while, and over the last few years I've spent a lot on buying older comics, mostly Marvel comics, but some other stuff as well. And I'm just kind of reevaluating, where I'm spending my time, where I'm spending my money, what I want, what I'm interested in, what I want to hold on to, all that, all part of collecting. And I think I'm really at a point now where I need to jettison stuff. Been talking about it. I think I'm going to make it my New Year's goal to try to reduce my collection by at least 10%, which sounds super easy, actually. I've already marked out little less than that amount to sell, and after I get the ball rolling, it's more about finding a way to sell in a way that I think is fruitful, and then moving through and then making some cuts. I know more of where I want to keep and where I don't now, and that's been healthy, and part of that is looking at maybe I don't need to be buying as much. So I've had a lot of thoughts around that, and I kind of want to talk about it as I go through because I think that's vaguely more interesting than me just holding up covers. So one of the first things was like, okay, if I was really gonna do deep cuts, like what would I absolutely want to keep buying? Turtles, top of my list, right? Okay, so boom, Armageddon game is interesting, it's moving, it's fun. And then we have this, which is part of the Armageddon game, but is just the regular series. I maintain my complaint that I don't know what order to read these issues in. I think the whole treating Turtles like a Marvel or DC event thing is a mistake. And ultimately will iron out once it's put in a hardback, but whatever. I also picked up the Saturday Morning Adventure mini because I'm me. I don't know. It was weird. It's an interesting divergence for me to see like the turtles that people remember versus the turtles that I've been reading for 10 years, and then in some ways more so, the different comic versions are very much different iterations. And the Saturday morning cartoon is such a far cry. The characters are really different. Like Raphael in the IDW series versus the Saturday morning is like not the same. So I don't know. It was interesting to think about, and I'm liking the Armageddon game, but the Armageddon game is also like three stories that are just happening at once. So I think it's a fun event. I also feel like it's kind of like what Tom Waltz would have been doing with the book if he had just stayed on, happening all at once. And as much as I'm enjoying that, and I'm curious to see if the things interweave a bit more by the time we get closer to the ending, I also feel like maybe these three stories would have been stronger if they just had a chance to live on their own. I don't know, but I refuse to even postulate on that idea until I see at least them come to fruition. So there we are. Next up is 007. This is a book I've already cut. I don't enjoy this. I don't enjoy reading Bond. It loses a lot of the personality. And on top of going three issues of this in, I also read a Benjamin Percy Bond book in the new Dynamite line of Bond. I know there's older Bond comic books, but I think those are more adaptations of the books. I'm sure parts of the movies came in along the history. I don't know the whole publishing history of Bond in comics, but um, it's not so much for me and not avenue I want to go down. I think I'd prefer to go read the original novels, if anything else, at this point. The next thing up is something I definitely would want to keep reading if I was to really make deep cuts, and that's obviously Amazing Spider-Man. This 10th issue is playing off the Judgment Day thing and this incarnation of Gwen judging Peter, and it doesn't really make sense. It points out it doesn't really make sense. I think this was a waste of an issue. But then we move into this Hobgoblin plot, playing with Ned Leeds, Robert Kinsley, and all that moving around. I think it's actually really engaging and a fun little story playing on something, but it is one of those new age Spider-Man stories that is playing so heavily on old Spider-Man lore. Um, it's sitting on a crutch. It's not going to be the strongest Spider-Man story ever told, but it's fun. I'm enjoying it. If Spider-Man's your thing, huzzah. Next up is one I'd actually recommend to more people is the Deadly Neighborhood Spider-Man. Spider-Man's having these dreams. He's in a science position doing things. This is very much a kind of out of continuity weird spider book, but the art's incredible. Um, this has been a fun book and the kind of B book that I wish we'd been getting forever. And part of the reason I uphold B books and talk about this offbeat Spider-Man stuff. This was fun, and I'm really excited to see where it goes next. And then oh man, this is going to be a thing. Um, the Slott Spider-Man came out. Spider-Man without an adjective. That's disappointing. It should have been spectacular or web of or sensational. They could have just brought back one of those titles instead of just Spider-Man. That's a miss. That is just a miss. No two ways around it. Bad decision. This cover is generic as hell, and I swear it was used on Ultimate. Just they pulled away the digital backgrounds that they used for whatever this one was from. I swear it's like volume 3 or something. This is on like, yeah. Okay. So cover and titling aside, what's in the book, right? Like that's what matters. But Slott's coming back. Come on, dress it up. Um, there's a fun little heist idea, and then very quickly we get launched into this idea of the Spider-Verse. Morlun pops out, and then all these different spider iterations pop out, and the Spider-Man Noir iteration goes venomous, I don't know, and starts going rogue. And so now Morlun isn't the top of the food chain. There's this upset thing. This is supposedly going to end the Spider-Verse ideal by cutting characters out of the web of life, and they nix Spider-Woman like without any thought. And I don't know. I'll read it. I'm interested, but this story is not worth drumming up a new line of Spider books for thus far. It was okay. This so far is off to the weakest start of any of the Spider-Verse books. This is already one of the weakest Dan Slott story starts that I remember. Though I will say this, as much as I am a fan of Dan Slott and his Spider-Man, I do feel like his bookends on books tend to be his weakest points, which means his starts and endings aren't the best, which is very middling praise, I guess. But it's there. Into Spider-Verse 5 came. The big one here is a Craven version that's like he's hunting the other spider villains, but as like the spider hunter or something. It could have been a really cool idea to examine Craven in a new light, but part of it is this has to be an anthology book and they have to tell their stories, and they didn't have the breadth to do kind of what I was thinking, which would have been a more in-depth character examination. Um, it was just at that point they're just throwing ideas against the wall and wasting them because they take no time to explore them. Even just a few more pages could have made a difference. It just didn't have time to tell the story that would have been interesting. Send eschews it to have a new version of a character, and so it's more about an idea than a story at that point, and then why even bother printing it? Iron Cat number 5 came. This was a really interesting story. It was a decent ending, but it did suffer from this idea that they have to have the big emotional hook between one of the antagonists and protagonists near the end of the book. And I'm trying to thread this needle without spoiling the story, but it's pretty cliche to have this happen, right? Where there's this big emotional bit that's happening right as the plot's happening. So like, while they should be worrying about explosions raining down, they're worrying about their feelings with each other. And then once the plot's done, we have like 2 pages and it closes out. Whereas it would have been better to finish the plot, give another couple pages for the characters to talk and just talk without action happening, which doesn't sound like better comics. And I was I've been hearing stuff with like Robert Kirkman talking about like you can't have talking heads too much, you need to have action and whatnot. But if you can't allow your characters to be interesting without guns being fired and explosions happening behind them at every minute, they're not interesting characters. This is a Spider-Man spin-off book. At the end of the day, half of Spider-Man's success comes from the soap opera. If you don't let those moments sing, your book suffers. And this book is at the height of that. And once again, I mean, this at a certain point has to come from editorial. Nick Lowe proves once again he's not fit for where he's at. I keep seeing it. It keeps coming out too often to not say that the editor's thumbprint isn't there. And it's the same guy every time that I have a lot of similar problems with. Yeah, it sucks. um, I bought this, a facsimile of Amazing Spider-Man 1. I don't know. I also bought this reprint of a comic that came out last year. It was like 10 cents. I don't know. I liked it. Next up is Daredevil. Issue 4, this whole idea of Matt Murdock and Elektra getting married as they go and create the Fist to fight the Hand, which will inevitably put them in line with the Punisher, is interesting. This issue just felt like place setting, though. And I'm curious to see where it's going to go next. Supposedly there's a delay with the way I'm getting my comics. I'm not sure how much it's really going to affect me. Then we got part 2 of the invasion of the Baxter Tower with this Propose, who I really wish they had given like 2 more issues, I guess, because they're not going to do an issue. We all know how much Marvel loves their anniversary issues. And they're not going to do an issue 50 of this Fantastic Four run. They're just going to start with Ryan North, issue 1, next issue. Okay. I mean, good for them, I guess, for having the gall to step away from an opportunity like that. But I really, the one time where I'm like, a cool writer could have gotten a shot to do a couple things. Oh well. Peter David, new Fantastic Four wrapped up. I don't think I have anything to say about this that I didn't talk about previously. It was a fun ride. I'm glad it was done. But now it's a little expensive to go on a vanity ride, so I don't know. The Variants, number 4. This is shaping out to be one of the best books Marvel's putting out. It's only going to be a limited run. I'm sure it'll be a tight trade. Totally worth checking out, and I'm sure most people aren't reading it. And then we move on to some of the more fun stuff, frankly. There's Mindset. This is a mini that at this point I'm finishing out. I think it's an interesting idea. It should have been a short story, not a comic. It's just the art isn't there for it in so many ways, and it just doesn't need to be that. Deadly Class ends. It was a weird ending. They clearly weren't planning on this when they started. It just kind of went. I don't know. I enjoyed the ending issue, but it's very clear that it was something that they wrote later. I don't know. It's fun, but I lost the thread of that book a while ago, so I don't know. The Dead Lucky continues. This is part of the whole Radiant Black universe. I don't know quite what to say here other than I think I'm kind of done with all these Radiant Black spinoffs. It feels like the same thing over and over again, and there's not as many consistent characters in Radiant Black itself. So that's something that I'm willing to step away from a bit. Once in Future ends as well. What a month, right, for this kind of thing. And I'm glad it's over. It was a fun ride. I feel like they could have cut out 6 issues or so, and it would have been stronger. But for something that was supposed to be a 6-issue mini, it became something more near and dear, and I think was something the comics world really needed at the time it was coming out. So that was cool. Drew Kvelt has lost me with all the supernatural stuff, and the way it's trying to play its humor just does not connect. I'm gonna finish it out, but It's only because I already ordered it. Yeah. Vanish #2. This lost me. Um, in here, they try to compare an inciting event in the universe and conflating it with 9/11 pretty, I mean, completely directly. And I don't know why. It's not like it's some sacred thing. It's not like 9/11's allowed to be touched, but I mean, it just felt cheap here. It just felt completely unnecessary. So I don't know. It just kind of lost me. I'm already in for a few more issues, though. I really like the first issue, so I'm wondering if maybe this just didn't hit me right, and maybe I'm just being, I don't want to say oversensitive. I wasn't offended or anything. It just pulled me right out of the book. Didn't feel right. I think it was a mistake. Um, and this weird conflation of magic, superheroes, and now real world tragedy events just feels like it's trying too hard to be edgy and not tell a story. Just tell me the story. You don't need to shock me this much. I don't need the shock. I need a reason to care about the characters to continue. And I'm not getting that. Then maybe more to the heart of what people might care about. Continued on with Thunderbolts. It's a mini, so I'm going to finish it out. But this book is not the height of what Thunderbolts is. And at this point, Thunderbolts is just a name Marvel throws around. I don't think the title has any meaning to it anymore. Eve, Children of the Moon. This is a Boom mini. It's pretty slow. There's this idea of these kids who saved the world, but they're purposely ambiguous about it. That comes around at the end of the issue. But there's a lot of play with just very simple idea of these kids on this post dystopic world, but things are being reborn. It's supposed to be good and new, but there's some lingering problems. Apparently, we don't get to that in this issue. It's fine, but this entire time I was reading it and just thinking like, you go and read an old issue of the Fantastic Four or something, and all this crazy stuff happens, and you get a story, and it's done in so many pages. It isn't moving, it isn't going anywhere. You're not telling me anything, you're not building any character, really. It's just a lot of dead air. And I think that's a big problem with a lot of what I've been trying to read when I'm trying to dig into indie comics now is this decompression without any build or understanding is just slow storytelling. It's not worth my time or my money or my effort to try to plow through. It's not that this is bad, it's that it's boring, which is bad. I guess I don't know what I'm trying to say. Like if someone enjoys it, good for them, but they're finding something in the book that I don't think the book is presenting itself as much. Junkyard Joe, New Image, Jeff Johns, the big name here. It's kind of a war story with a robot that's kind of pulling through a la kind of a superhero thing. Feels like an old Marvel comic war stuff, or I guess the DC stuff, either too. Take your pick. It's in that tradition. It's fine. I'm willing to try it again, keep going, but if it doesn't build too much too quickly, I'll probably drop it, not for any lack of anything other than keeping slots open to try something else new. It's not my bag, baby. And then Wes Craig, Deadly Class ended, and now we have Kaya, and this is kind of like those books. You remember when everything was adventures when it was for kids in the 90s? This has that kind of vibe to it. There's a lot of stuff that kind of just happens. Feels like it's aimed, you're supposed to just go along with it. Compared to the other stuff Wes has worked on, this feels different. I don't know if I like it or dislike it at this point, though. I think I need to keep going with it for a little bit. It's very different than anything else in my pile, and so I'm intrigued. But I couldn't make my mind up on it as I was reading it just now. So I don't know. Interesting book. If you're looking for something off the path right now, I think it's worth checking out. It's not comics, but it's I mean, even for Image, it's not their usual fare. So that's worth supporting on some level just in its own right. Then there's the X books. I haven't finished all of them yet. I didn't feel like I needed to, but I might be making some cuts in X, which is weird. So Gambit by Claremont is one of the best books Marvel's putting out because it's Claremont going back to old school storytelling with like setting and introducing new characters because he can and having fun. And already they have more personality than, oh my God, than a lot of other characters. So great. um, then I just kind of got to talk about it as a blob because that's how I read it and I can't follow it. Judgment Day happened. There's Death to Mutants 3, which is supposed to be the big one. I don't know. There's Eternals, which barely has the Eternals in it. It's more like Iron Man and Jean Grey. And then there's this X-Men one, which is mostly the same stuff, but again, but slightly different. Um, yeah. And then there was the final Judgment Day comic until Omega because numbers are hard. In which things seem to be resolved, but then they aren't. And then we get to Immortal X and bigger events happen in this than the event book. Okay, so publishing stuff aside, it's just weird, and now we're dealing with some weird end of days stuff, and Nightcrawler seems to be centering about it, and a lot of it is positioned on the idea that, well, can the X-Men resurrect a human? And then at the end of the event, they decide, like, oh, well, like, infirmed or sick kids who never really had a chance, we're going to do. Okay, cool. That's nice of them, I guess. I have political lines that I can actually point to of being like, yeah, that's, I guess, okay, but like, oof. And then here, Captain America just freaking bites and they resurrect him, and like as an afterthought to that whole series, that's when they're doing this. That's weird. Um, and also raises more complications with that political idea that they just set an establishment for and then just reneged within the same month of publishing. It's not even the next issue because how do you count that here? Um, yeah, it's just a mess. It's a hot mess. Then there's the Legion of X issue, which I don't even care. Legion comes out okay, I guess, because he has to. He gets a thumbs up. I wish everybody got a. But I'm just going to talk through some of these where I'm at right now. I haven't liked Marauders since it relaunched, and if this issue isn't good, I might cut it off. New Mutants. This is supposed to be a big new deal, so I'm curious to see where this goes. That series turned around for me. X Force dealing with Craven. This has been one of the best X books. I'm definitely going to be continuing with that. Wolverine continues. A lot of people have problems with Percy overall, I found, the more I look at people's opinions on things. I think he's one of the best Wolverine writers ever. And if you ever listen to the podcast stuff he did, that definitely is among the best stuff he did. Uh, I don't get the hate for him, but I don't know if the series is so great. But having read a lot of Wolverine now, it's a cut above the average fare, at least. I can say that definitively. Um, X-Men Red feels like the most important book, but now Wolverine's dead somewhere in that hodgepodge of an event, and that's a big deal. I'm like, dead. They're not going to resurrect him because he didn't want to be, because that would compromise his ideals. So, okay, whatever. I mean, you kind of have to get the X-Men book if you're going to be following X-Men at all. This I would drop now, but it's a 5 issue mini and I've already bought through. And then Legends tends to be interesting because it's harkening back to older eras of X-Men and like inserting stories with old creators, which is very a la that new Fantastic Four or the Craven story that they're going to be telling with J.M. DeMatteis soon, and a handful of these other projects Marvel's done with their older creators, kind of going back to their heyday. I feel like it started with this, um, the first volume of this series, that they just continued with another volume without breaking for no reason. I don't. The numbering on it is nonsense to begin with, anyways, because these are stories that take place in old like X Factor, X Force, Wolverine. So like, where does it belong in your collection? I don't know, it's just a weird thing, but I'm all for it. It's like these cool story ideas from different status quos, and they're just going doing it with all the superhero stuff we have. I think that's an idea that should be played on more regularly. So that's where it's at with this month in comics. Also, my next big read through, I think, is going to be, I just got this Miracle Man collection. It all came at once, kind of ironically. There's this Zero, this Silver Age issue, this omnibus, there's the Golden Age. So I'm going to read Miracle Man as much as I own here. I don't know if there's anything else for me to read because the publishing history is kind of a mess. Coming to a cold, it's certainly not a nice clean idea. So far as my understanding is, I should be good. Once I read it, I'll probably have a clearer picture, and I'll look into it. And at this point, whether I like it or not will determine whether I want more. I also got this book I want to look through, Fantastic Four: The First 60 Years. I don't know. But like I said, I'm trying to look at like cutting down some of my comics, and I have been. I've been trying to look at events a bit less. That's always a dicey proposition. Like with DC, I dropped out on their event book. I did. I have been reading that. I got the Green Arrow issue too, but um, eh. Duo finish. That's a mini. I will be getting Wildcats kind of in its place, I guess. But the spider books, I feel like with the minis, I'm gonna be pickier because I remember there was a few when I was buying them initially. I was kind of thinking like, do I even really want this? Well, I have all the rest, so why not? And that's an instinct I'm kind of moving away from. I'm getting a better sense of different things, certain creators, when certain books are positioned for people who are not me. Exterminators is a great example. That's for more this new crowd of like younger women readers who need like certain kind of thing in their book, which is cool. I'm glad that's there for them. I'm not them. Uh I know in a lot of, and I was trying a bunch of AWA comics for a while. Everything out of that publisher just kind of skeeved me out. I was really trying to push to buy new and different comics, and I'm realizing more and more right now I'd rather spend my time like right there prominently behind me. There's that Starman collection. I bought the omnibus collection last year because two of the books are basically becoming impossible to get, and so I got them while I could because they're recollecting Starman now in those compendium soft cover, but like there's two of them to cover the material of what's in six of those big hardcover books. They're just uncomfortable to read, and so I spent a little more money to get the printing I wanted. I have that, and I want to read it. I just got 3 volumes of the Complete Madman. I want to read those. I bought nearly every Fantastic Four, nearly every Daredevil, nearly every X-Men, nearly every Spider-Man. Still haven't read most of those. I want to sit down and read those. And I feel like if things come up that really grab me, of course I'm going to get it. But this trying to push into the industry in the weird corners just to be a cool comic kid isn't doing anything for me right now. So I'm going to kind of focus on what I got and make time for that. I think that's going to be more fruitful. Which isn't to say I'm not going to be doing some of this. Like, I tried Junkyard Joe. Yeah, I'm probably going to try another few issues, see how that goes. Other things are going to crop up, catch my interest, the new colorful, shiny thing. That's all it is.